Good evening and welcome to African Voices platform. My name is Tchiyiwe Chihana and I'm your host tonight. Tonight we're all about Somaliland, the semi-autonomous state, recently held elections, and I've got a whole group of people that are joining me from various interest areas in Somaliland. So I'll start by introducing Diana Roffey and Adam Yusuf. If you could just unmute yourselves and say hello to our audiences. Good evening.
Hi, I'm Diana Roffey. I was born in Somaliland a while back, and I have moved to Sheffield, and I'm a friend of Somaliland and work with Eryal, the charity who the chairman who is sitting next to me.
Thank you so much. Chairman, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, and thank you very much for giving us the opportunity. We appreciate the African Voices to give us this platform. Yeah, and as you said, my name is Adam Yusuf. I'm the chair of Israel Somali community, but equally the chair of Somaliland Recognition Committee. And I think the subject matter is to discuss about Somaliland election. We appreciate it.
Lovely, thank you. And I'd like to introduce Safiya Saeed, a newly elected ward councillor in Burngreave here in Sheffield. Good evening, Safiya.
Good evening. Thank you so much for inviting me today. This is an amazing opportunity to celebrate together about the success of Somaliland and the elections. I am a councillor here for the Labour ward, for Burngreave ward, and I'm very happy to be here.
Congratulations. Looking forward to chatting to you a bit more about that. And good evening, Yasin. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi. My name is Yasin, and I'm the director of Eryal TV, one of the Somaliland televisions. So I'm happy to participate in this program.
Lovely to have you. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. I'll go straight into asking this question. Adam, what's the context of these elections that have just taken place in Somaliland?
This has been a historical election for Somaliland. And since Somaliland became independent 30 years ago, and we've had a successive, probably 4 presidential election, which has all been fair and free election. But this one has been different. We've been waiting it for the last 15 years. And hence, it is important because both the opposition parties, the 2 opposition parties and the current Kulmiya party have been in negotiation. And it took them a long time to agree on the formalities and the modalities and how the election should happen. So like any other political parties in any other country, it's not an easy process. And I think they all came to a conclusion and an understanding that this election should happen in a fair, free election. And they had to put the resources together and the mechanics. In other words, they used an ID biometric cards and making sure all the infrastructure for a successful election to take place. So it has been a lot of challenges, both resourceful and understanding, as well as preparing the Somaliland society to do the election. And so there's been a lot of education, training at a local level, grassroots level, to make sure that this was an important election, which all the people in Somaliland, including the political parties and the government, including the wider society, have ownership and a stake into making sure it was a successful.
This is really key part of the election process to educate the people of Somaliland to take ownership and responsibility for their individual vote. And it's on the back of that these elections have been, lots of people have been contributing to the elections, and lots of people have voted. And it's enabled those elections to be free of corruption and free of any violence. So in fact, they've been a very, very positive thing for the people of Somaliland, because they've been involved and they understand their individual responsibility and their individual contribution to the part that they're playing in their society and their country.
Lovely. Thanks a lot for that, Diana and Adam. Yasin, just to give it a bit more context, these particular elections were presidential and parliamentary elections in a largely I would say there's been good international coverage on average, really, probably better than the last few times. What do you think the direction is looking like now internationally for Somaliland's recognition?
I think Somaliland is taking a very, very good step. And the more than 1 million of Somalilanders voted, casted their votes 31st of May, electing their parliamentary and local councillors. And yes, there was international observers who came to Somaliland and political figures to see how the process is going. And they gave a statement last week before they leave the capital of Somaliland, and they said the election was free and fair. So that's the beauty of the democracy, practicing democracy. So it's absolutely that election went well, and I would like to thank the president of Somaliland, Mudane Musa Bihi Abdi, and the chairman of Electoral Election Commission, Eryal, and the political parties. The election went very smoothly, no peace and no problem whatsoever. So that's the beauty, that we practice in democracy, and it will attract the international communities.
Right, thank you so much. Now, Safiya, if you could come on, please. I just wanted to get some context from you. Somaliland had 13 women running for parliament in these races. None of them have won. What's your comment around women's representation in politics at present?
I think that the fact that they actually went through the process, and the fact that they mentally, financially stepped up this year, obviously it's a huge disappointment to have not to have any women representative, but we have women representing Somaliland in every single level and platforms right now. Women are frontliners, they are the gatekeepers, they are fantastic entrepreneurs, they open up their own businesses, they they run the markets as well as everything else. They also graduate a lot through universities, and I think as long as we women in power, and we could utilize so much resources in terms of educating more women into politics and into different aspects of life, I think we will give the men the run for their money next year, or a year after that, or in 4 years. But it's the idea of going for it itself is a winning, and winning or losing is the journey. And I think there's no harm of trying again, and I think there's no harm of impacting the young girls to come forward and say, you know what, care about your country, and have an impact and fight for equality in every single level that we can. So I'm very proud of my country. I am absolutely flabbergasted how well it went. I mean, I was hearing a story that one of the queues, there was a lady that actually gave birth, and she named her baby the same person that she was going to vote for. So that's quite emotional, and that's what you call commitment. So I've never seen so much passionate people coming forward, and the women, they make half that society. So I'm so proud of every single woman that stood there for hours and hours in the sun and, gave her voice. And I'm so proud of a country that gives so much women, the power that they could register and they could follow easy. And also they were the ones that was giving people directions and making sure they were COVID safe, and they were, so they were in the voting system. They were there as well as organizers. So
they were facilitating a lot of
facilitating, that's the word, yes,
a lot of the elections activities. But we still did not get a vote, so I'm still not going to steer away from that. However, Diana and Adam, quite significantly, 1991 is when Somaliland became the the nation that it is. So meaning that the young people who were born at that time have obviously qualified and are moving on and getting very involved in politics this time around. I'm given to understand that also kind of informed how big a turnout Somaliland had in this election, because the young people have grown now, they're participating actively. The elephant in the room, however, is Somaliland still has the problem of not being internationally recognized. And Diana, you're very active in working around international recognition of Somaliland. You have a statement from somebody who is quite prominent in UK politics, and that's Clive Betts. Did you want to go ahead and read that for us?
Yes, indeed I would. Yeah, we've got a statement from Clive Betts, who is the chairman of the all-party parliamentary group on Somaliland. And I'll just read it if you don't mind. The recent elections in Somaliland are a huge milestone. After 16 years, Somaliland were able to undertake free and fair elections, which saw the two opposition parties elected, who are now in the process of collectively choosing a speaker to run the new administration. This election is truly remarkable and shows that despite the huge difficulties and challenges Somaliland has faced, it is able to work towards a democratic future. Best wishes. So we've got this. This is a recognition from the UK, and also I have a quote from one of the US senators. Can I read that as well?
Go ahead and read that. Yeah. So who is the US senator? Sorry.
It's Chris Smith. He's a ranking member of the House of Foreign Affairs Committee Africa Subcommittee. And he says that I congratulate the people of Somaliland for holding a successful parliamentary and council elections. Somaliland is fast becoming a democratic model, not only for Somalia and the Horn, but for all of Africa. And there is recognition here that the US can lead the way in that regard by including a visit into Hargeisa and meeting publicly with Somaliland parliamentarians on any trips to the Horn of Africa. So there is increasing, it's really, really important for the Republic of Somaliland that we get recognition for what's gone on, and the fact that these elections have been so successful means that that's a step forward for Somaliland to get full recognition as an independent state, and we're going to work as hard as we can to use this as a platform to increase awareness within the UK, particularly. Obviously, we're based here, and I think we feel that very positive about what has happened and how we can move forward with that. And in terms of
Diana, just before you continue, I realize Councillor Safiya has got to leave us. Councillor Safiya, why is it really important, before you go, why is it really important that Somaliland gets this recognition?
It's very important because we have got a lot to give, and we've given a lot around the world. There's a lot of things we can learn about Somaliland, our history, our survival, our strength to survive, our strength to voice ourselves, the fact that we use our own resources, the fact that we are homing other refugees as well to come and live in our country with respect and with so much love. The fact that we can actually turn our sand into gold. It's so full of history. It's so full of young people that want to come forward. We are internationally known, whether they recognize us or not. We have a flag on top of our head, and we are proud to pray under it.
Thank you so much, Councillor. And yeah, congratulations again on becoming a ward councillor in Sheffield.
Everybody. Thank you. I see.
Yasin, could you come in on that? I really feel like there's a strong discussion that can be discussed on this around international recognition.
Yes, I can give you two quotes from the international observers. One, John Gikako, who is an anti-corruption campaigner from Kenya, who was in Hargeisa. said this on his Twitter. The one Somali with a bottom-up democracy that seems for organically work. That's his quote, and he was one of the observers. And also another observer from South Africa, Greg Mills, director of South African-based group, said Somaliland represents an example of an African country which is committed to democracy and development and deserve the support of every African who wants to see progress on this continent. So that's the two main quotes that I can give you now. But international observers, they were more from different countries, different continents, and the media from different countries. Yes, so the election was covered, and if you Google it, you can get many quotes from different angles.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Adam. Adam, what's your comment around this issue? I mean, the parallels between Mogadishu's reaction to this and Nairobi's, for example. Any comments around that recognition angle?
Yeah, just briefly, and I think the recognition within the Somaliland community and society, one thing is very clear. They believe in themselves, that they have to get their house in order, not to impress any outsider. So that is something to take away, which is they have a belief that they can make a difference, they can coexist, they can live in peacefully and harmony, and make sure they share the resources that they have within themselves and utilize the little resources they have within themselves and not depend on handouts or aids. So that belief is the strong foundation of the democratization, if you like, and built within the culture and the nomadic way of life of our traditions. So those are the kind of qualities that the Somaliland were able to flourish, and that was the core foundation to build from the democracy. So yeah, so what I think Diana just reminded me is all the election, everything was self-funded by Somaliland government, were paid by the taxpayers of the Somaliland citizens. So that was a clear testament that there was no outside interference or aid or part funded. It was 100% funded by the Somaliland and government and the society. So coming back to the question you've asked, the Kenyan model, I think the Kenyans and international observers who were there, they were very impressed. I think one of the examples in one of the observers, he said the election commissioner was just walking freely with no bodyguard. That was unheard of in East Africa. I was born in Kenya. There's no way a commissioner can just walk without a bodyguard. And they were very surprised. So some of the international observers picked that as surprising, an element of surprise where the election commissioner was just walking with no bodyguard at all. So that was a very interesting scenario. But coming back to Mogadishu, we've had congratulations from ministers from Mogadishu. There was a lady minister who was congratulating one of the Barkhat, and the appointed and member of the parliament, and they come from the same and clan or tribal, if you like. But she was very impressed and gave Somaliland credit for what they've achieved. So there is a recognition and supportive from the Somalia and the current and regime. And they said there's a lot we can learn from Somaliland. And they were saying, you could teach us some of the elements or qualities that you have. And I think Somaliland are prepared to extend that brotherly and sisterly to Somalia, and whatever lessons they've learned, they're happy to share that.
Thank you. Dan, I want to come back to you in the context of Friends of Somaliland, but also again on the question around the movement that you're part of that's looking to see that Somaliland does get recognition. You were talking to me earlier about some charitable work that's doing in Somaliland, but also as part of the movement to ensure that there's still a strong voice around recognition of Somaliland. Could you talk me through that?
Well, you know, it's a slow progress process, but you know, I think that it comes on the back of the 30 years of the Republic of Somaliland, on the 18th of May. So it's small steps. The BBC on Radio 4 had an article about Somaliland elections, and I think that but there's a building momentum, and you know, and the elections are part of that process. So there's a wide diaspora of Somalilanders around the world, and they are contributing to society in all different countries around the world, and particularly the women. You know, the women they may not have won the seats, you know, but you know, from what I observe, the women, and especially the young women, are highly educated, and they're making a difference all around the world. You know, they're doctors, they're well educated, lawyers, and I think that their influence and their passion for their homeland, it will all build this momentum for the betterment of the people of Somaliland. So you know, it is a process, and this is one step along the way.
Lovely, thank you so much for that. Yasin, would you like to discuss a little bit about the coalition of the two opposition parties and what the implications of that are?
Yes. After the election finished, there were only 82 seats. So the political parties won the majority of the seats, of the parliamentary seats. So Wadani Party won 31, U'id Party, who is another opposition party, won 21, and the ruler party, Kulmiye, won 30. So that's 52 out of 82, the majority that the opposition parties are leading. So they announced yesterday, they given a statement which they saying we are, they call it political alliance. So for the Speaker of the Parliament. So that's the up-to-date, but they also nominated committees from two parties, political parties, opposition parties. So they take their first meeting today. Right. So we don't have anything at the moment to tell you, but maybe tomorrow or day after tomorrow, we will hear something from them.
Good. So from what has happened there, it speaks a bit to, just bring it to the Sheffield context. I mean, the Sheffield context, we don't have a proportional representation in the UK. We do first past the post, and it means that usually it's not necessarily the number of votes that go to a political party, but it's you know, the representation in the council, for example, is not necessarily reflective of how people voted. But it sounds like with Somaliland, with proportional representation, you actually get to have those numbers. You can say we got this number of parliamentarians because they got more votes, and they've come in to have a coalition. Here in Sheffield, we've seen the Green Party and Labour Party coming to a similar coalition. To influence policy, I suppose. But what does that actually mean for the ruling party in Somaliland? What's the implication of this coalition? Adam,
go ahead.
Yeah. I think what has transpired, I listened to the comment of one of the leaders of opposition party called U'id, Faisal Ali. And I think what his comment were, that is checks and balances. They feel empowered. Now they can have the ruling Kulmiye party to account. So in other words, by having more power within the legislative and in the parliamentarian, they can question things which they think are not and correct or appropriate. So in a nutshell, it's having the checks and balances, where the ruling party doesn't have it all on its own, the total control of absolute, and therefore the checks and balances are very critical, and the opposition will play that important role.
And the ruler party congratulated the results. So there's no issue, there's no problem between the political parties, but the opposition parties, they are forming this alliance to to form to get the leader of the parliamentary house.
Just to add on that, I think that shows the level of maturity of within the Somali community and political circles, where although they will agree to disagree on issues, there is a high level of respect to protect the unity of Somaliland. So that is a paramount, clear importance. So despite they will agree to disagree, it's important that they congratulate and come together on common issues.
Lovely. Thanks a lot, Adam and Yasin. So I mean, it's well and good. We appreciate that Somaliland is a beacon of stability across the continent when it comes to elections and how they've been doing, and the semi-recognition and its semi-autonomous state. I wonder though, much as you say, as long as Somalilanders themselves recognize themselves and appreciate, I wonder though whether there's an implication by the African Union, for example, not making mention or not recognizing. Is there anything that the Somalilanders miss out by not having that? Anyone can take that.
I think, yeah, go on, Diane.
Well, what impresses me is how Somalilanders have grown from within. So in fact, you know, they have not had a great deal of influence from the outside, and it's been a growth from within. So in fact, it seems to me that they can probably continue along those lines, from growing from within, and a lot of the businesses are not on credit. They generate their own income, and it's a very rich nation in terms of what the resources that it has. So, and it has a lot to offer. So in fact, it's in a unique position. And from my understanding, other countries are making contact with Somaliland and setting up these ties. The Taiwanese government recognized the Somaliland as an independent nation. And so, you know, whilst they may not have that full recognition, but they don't need it right now. They don't actually need it because they are growing. They have grown, and they have had these elections on the back of their own resources, of their own skills and their own decision making. And I think that actually other countries are going to be coming to them and knocking on their door, you know, because it's a country with unique opportunity, with huge numbers of young people, huge resources, a wonderful country. So I think that actually, you know, it's people are going to be knocking on their doors, you know, wanting to set up trade and communication.
Yeah, just to add on that, coming back to your question, the African Union are taking notice, whether they like it or not. Because media, we live in the age of social media. So whether they want to bury Somaliland news, well, they can't. A lot of diaspora in Canada, Australia, America, Europe, Middle East, other African countries, there's a lot of Somaliland diaspora. They have taken initiatives and obviously and you know, and spread the message. So it can't be buried. Any good news can't be buried for too long. But coming back on the positive, a number of African countries have set up embassies in Hargeisa. The latest is the Kenyan High Commission. They have the latest is the Kenyan. They have opened a consular. Kenya Airways is starting soon flights. You have Ethiopian Airlines coming almost twice or three times a day daily in Hargeisa. You have Djibouti. So the countries that have representatives are Djibouti, Kenya, soon Uganda and Tanzania are also talking to the Somaliland government. So there's a number of African countries who have consular offices and representatives at a government level. So you have a growing number of African countries opening an office in Hargeisa, but equally in the international observers, you have the ex-president of Sierra Leone, who was one of the international observers. You have the opposition leader from Uganda, who was also part of the international observers. And you have Brenhurst Foundation from South Africa, who were taking a lead in and bringing all the international observers and making sure they were part of the monitoring and observation of the election.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much for that. Now, Yasin, could you talk?
That's really, yeah. Adding to that is Somaliland, the recognition of Somaliland is all about practicing democracy. So, and attract the eyes of the world's eyes. Somaliland, even Sheffield, we're here, recognized Somaliland a couple of years ago. And other cities, London, Birmingham, and Cardiff, Bristol, they all recognize locally as a local councillors. But it's growing. We will get there.
Yeah, yeah.
If you continue practicing these democratic practices, we will get there. The recognition will come one day. And as Adam said, all the offices from other neighborhood countries is in Hargeisa. So you name it. So they're all there. They know what's going on in Somaliland.
Okay, yeah, no, I can see the traction. I can see the traction and the movement and the shift as well. Can I come back to the question of elections? So these parliamentary elections were delayed. The next election, I believe, is supposed to happen in 2022, and that's the presidential election. What's the story behind the delay of these parliamentary elections, and how do we get assurance that we don't get a delay with the presidential ones that are upcoming? Go ahead, Yasin, on that one. What caused the delay, and do you think it will affect the presidential elections?
I think, yes, it has been delayed. And the biggest reason when, like a couple of years ago, was a drought and the disaster. And, so that's one of the biggest, you cannot help an election when people are dying. And when the country is in a critical situation. So I think that's the main issues. But the government, whether this government or the previous one, they're always willing to hold an election. And that's why, like Adam said earlier, there's no funding from international communities. The Somaliland paid every single penny that goes to these elections. So I think it's not something like you can say this, but that's the main disasters happened when the election was supposed to be held.
I think if I just add is as Yasin just said, environmental, there was a drought, but also logistics and resources. And I think, and also discussion between the opposition and the government to make sure they were all happy. For example, setting up the commission. Setting up that commission that has to be independent from politics. So even negotiating that can take, is time consuming. It's not that easy. So that both parties are happy with it, that they're accountable. There is no bias. So making sure that that mechanism is in place. And I think the fact that both parties, opposition and the government, have taken the timing that this was the right time. And I think the choosing of the right time was also a factor into this, because there is so many dynamics that we are not privy to, which they have that information, will have made it possible for them to make the decision that it's now rather than before.
Lovely, thank you. And so do we see the same players in 2022 vying for the presidency? What's your expectation?
Just before Yasin answer or Diane comes into that, I think this particular election has brought young people who were not on the arena, because we had a lot of older generation politics, if you like, with baggage. Here you are, young people who, as you said, born 30 years ago, and who had no previous understanding or history of Somalia, who have grown up in Somaliland, who have different way of thinking and dynamics. And therefore, there is an emergence of young people, because the population of Somaliland is 70% almost young people. And therefore, these young people have different vision. They are called the so-called millennial kids, as we call them in the West. So they have a totally different future, how they see the world. And therefore, it's welcoming. And therefore, I think there will be a lot of young people who potential candidates and for the future who will become a very good presidential candidates. And they're already and can be seen now.
I think, my understanding is that, you ask about question whether there'd be any further delay, but in fact, the people of Somaliland are invested it's invested themselves in the process. So there is this momentum, and they're not going to want to have it taken away from them. You know, it's in their interest, and they understand that, and that's why there's a big turnout. That's why they came out to vote. You know, obviously there's been the COVID will have made impacted on the timing of the elections. You know, to organise. You know, it's truly remarkable that they've managed to organise an election in these times. They're very difficult times. So I think that, you know, we might be proved wrong, but I think that the impetus is there because the people want it, you know, and it's you know, it's very hard once people get invested in something, which is in their own interest, that it's in their interest to do it. So, you know, the ball is rolling, and I think that and it's all positive. You know, it is a positive path for the people. You know, and that's demonstrated, as I said, because there haven't been any problems with the election, and that's a fairly, you know, it is truly unique, really, that and truly remarkable what has been achieved here in Somaliland. It really is quite remarkable, and they really should be congratulated for such a tremendous election in these times. You know, it really does require considerable congratulations to them. They've done really, really well.
Absolutely. Okay, and what's the worst that could actually happen now that you there's enthusiasm, there was expectation? What is it that made people vote the way they did this time around that they didn't like before, perhaps? Anything? Because it can't all just be positive. There's got to be some story there politically. What's the Somaliland cry, if you will?
Yasin, do you want to go? Or?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I think the expectation is to deliver the programs, because every politician, even we know in the West, they promise a lot. So the challenge for the politicians who've now been appointed to the power will have to deliver the programs that they promised to the local citizens. And I think that's a challenge, even in the Western world that we live in. So I think the expectation is, for example, in Hargeisa, the capital city, and the roads and a lot of basic infrastructure need to be really and deliver those programs to the local citizens for the taxpayer. So those are the expectations. The dollar of the taxpayer have to be delivered, that they got basic services, proper education, health, sanitary, sanitation. So all those kinds of agriculture sector, because Somaliland are now starting to grow, so that there's a food security, that they don't import food from outside. So those are all the challenges that the politicians have to deliver.
Right, lovely. Well, I was going to bring Yasin in, but we seem to have lost his video. So just any last comments from you, from all of you, friends of Somaliland, whether in that capacity or any other capacity, before we say goodnight?
Well, yeah, I just wish them well. And as Adam says, there are challenges ahead, and it is incumbent on those who have been elected to follow through with what they've said they're going to do, and it is challenging for them, and I wish them well from here in Sheffield. So but you know, with further recognition around the world, and you know, trade deals that they will be signing, the potential is there, the future is there for them, and it is difficult to become successful through that, because you've got to balance all the different things that there are for people to do. It's a very difficult process to stay independent. You know, they've come so far in such a short time, and you know, there are many players out there, and to retain the independence, to retain the freedom of movement for people, food security. So yes, there are a lot of challenges, but you know, they've made a really good start, and seeing that through and having the support of the people is really important.
But equally, because we've shown other African countries that we can deliver in terms of democracy, I think it's maintaining that and making sure we don't fall any, and because there is an expectation for Somaliland to deliver that. So it's maintaining that and making sure it's sustainable. But equally, I think for the international community not to continue to ignore Somaliland, to support them, because they have shown that they can do the little steps that they were able to do. In the example of Somalia, international community are giving huge amount of resources to Somalia to make sure that a democratization takes root. And yet, a country which is like Somaliland, the size of Somalia, who has shown that they were able to do with no resources from the international community, are not being supported. So for those of us in the diaspora, what we are trying to say is that Somaliland should be supported and make sure that they deliver the programs to the local citizens, and they have a seat in the UN and become a sovereign, independent country. And that is the aspiration for all the citizens of Somaliland.
Thank you so much. I'm going to try and see if Yasin is back on as well to give his final comments. Yasin, are you still there? Okay, so we really do appear to have lost Yasin. I would like to thank you so much for joining us tonight on African Voices platform, where we've been talking about the recently held elections in Somaliland. Our next show is next week, Wednesday, and good night, and thanks so much for joining us tonight.